Welcome to Take the Battle to the Ballot Box. Black Votes Matter. My name is Gwen Grant. I am CEO of the Urban League of Greater Kansas City. Thank you for joining us today. These are turbulent times in our nation and right here in Kansas City. We are in the midst of a pandemic that is having disproportionate deleterious effect on Black Americans. We have witnessed the modern day lynching of George Floyd, and many of those we've elected to represent us have fallen far short of our expectations. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, protesters, young and old, Black, white, and brown, rich and poor, took to the streets in nonviolent protests calling for wide sweeping reforms in law enforcement. Among the demands is a call for defunding the police or reallocating revenues from law enforcement budgets to education, healthcare, housing, food insecurity, and more. Today's panelists will talk about how we take the battle from the street to the ballot box. We will discuss the importance of voting, the power of voting, and what needs to be done to inspire more young people, Black, white, and brown, to show up and vote. So we have a lot of territory to cover today, so I'm going to get started with the introduction of our panelists. We have Ms. Lori Elam, the Director for the Kansas City Board of Election Commissioners, Reverend Dr. Vernon Howard, President of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Melissa Johnson, Attorney at Law with Seyfarth, Blumenthal, and Harris. We have KJ, who is the lead organizer for Black Rainbow, Cecilia Belzer Patton, Director of Inclusion and Equity with Yes on 2, and Reverend Rodney Williams, President of the NAACP Kansas City chapter. We'll begin our dialogue with Lori. And Lori, I don't see Lori here. Has she come back yet? Okay, so we were going to open up with our dialogue about voting. And I know that, Lori, are you with us? No. So we're going to switch to, we're just going to move ahead and talk about one of the important issues on the ballot tomorrow, and that is Medicaid expansion. And so let's get started with our guest, Cecilia Belzer Patton. Cecilia, so you've been playing a leading role in a statewide coalition to pass Medicaid expansion in Missouri. So in addition to Health Forward, what are some of the other organizations that have been involved in this effort, and what is it that you want our audience to know? Why is it so important that everyone vote yes on Amendment 2 tomorrow?
Thank you so much, Ms. Grant, for having me here this afternoon and allowing us to represent the issues of Yes on 2, which is actually Medicaid expansion in our state. It's wonderful to be here with Reverend Rodney and Dr. Howard and Lori when she gets back on. And KJ, as well as Melissa, to really be able to share out all of the different ways in which we need to be, and hopefully that we all want to be engaging civically and for our better good. Some of the organizations that are in the coalition for yesonto.org are right here on this line with us. NAACP, both statewide, Kansas City, St. Louis, and all of the other chapters have endorsed. SCLC has endorsed. Urban League in both Kansas City and St. Louis have endorsed, as well as a broad coalition. This is one of the broadest coalitions that any issue in the state of Missouri has seen. We are at the table with the Missouri Hospital Association, Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, the United Way in both Kansas City and St. Louis, various chambers of commerce throughout the state, including St. Louis, Springfield just signed on last week, Columbia, Jefferson City, which is really unheard of. It's unheard of to have this broad of a coalition around an issue. And so we'd like for everyone to know that this is a nonpartisan issue, right? It is bigger than whether one is a Democrat or whether one is a Republican. It's a people issue. It's about us believing that people should have health care. It is about us believing that it is a moral imperative for people to have health care. And if they need something on top of that, being able to understand that the economic boom and economic vibrancy that we will experience in our state from expanding Medicaid has happened in the 36 other states that have expanded, now 37. Oklahoma passed Medicaid expansion just a couple of weeks ago. And so what we have noticed in those states is that there has been a boom in jobs. The average jobs are about 19,000 jobs per state, specifically in rural areas and urban areas, about 60% rural and 39% urban. We've experienced that rural hospitals and urban healthcare centers have been able to stay open. And we've experienced that, especially in times such as these, in times such as a pandemic, that people have been able to take care of themselves. I would like for us to imagine what benefit Missouri may have experienced if we had already expanded Medicaid in March during this time of this pandemic. It has cost us billions of dollars, and of course it's worth it. People's lives are worth it. And we could have saved those billions of dollars if we had expanded prior. Dr. Williams, Reverend Rodney Williams and Dr. Vernon Howard were part of a coalition that has been trying to expand Medicaid since 2011. And so it is not a new issue. It is an issue that we must move forward in our communities here in Kansas City, communities that the Urban League serves. We know that healthcare is an issue, that many people have to utilize the emergency room as their healthcare space, which does not help us to live as vibrant, as healthy, and as whole a lives as we can. And so we want to do this. And while we on this call may not be experiencing health disparity, and have not moved in life without having health care, surely we know someone in our family, surely we know someone in our community, in our church, that we rub elbows with all the time, that might be living in this type of disparity.
Okay, so thank you for that. So what happens, so it appears that with all of this support and the work that's been going on for the past year in this really concerted effort to ensure that Medicaid expansion passes. What are do you all have polling information? Are we looking good tomorrow? Or are we, what?
We do. We're looking very good, actually. And I get very afraid to say that, Ms. Gwen. Like, I don't want to tell people, you know what I mean?
I know, right?
I don't want to say, hey, we're great. And then people think I don't have to show up at the polls. Show up at the polls, please vote. If you have not already done so through a mail-in ballot or absentee ballot, please make sure that you vote tomorrow. And we are looking very good. We're looking as if that we will finally be able to expand Medicaid into our state. And as we know, our opposition, people have dropped money and lies that they have told about expanding Medicaid in the last 3 days. And so our opposition is steady. Our opposition is going to continue to tell the lie that this will bankrupt our state. Not true, not at all true. What states that have expanded Medicaid has found, like I said, it has given them greater economic stability and viability. They've improved jobs in their state, and they've also improved the quality of healthcare that they have been able to give people, and it's remained neutral. And so what they call that in politics is that it's race neutral. So it hasn't made taxes go up, it hasn't made taxes go down, they stayed the same. So there's not this combustible way in which they have made us to feel like that we will be bankrupted in Missouri. It will more than likely be the exact opposite. And so we're looking good. I think that most people are reading through that. Most people are reading through the lies that they have shared. Something just came out, some horrid mailers in specific parts of the state saying that illegal immigrants, I don't like to call people that. I would like to call people undocumented, our undocumented neighbors, that they will benefit from Medicaid expansion, which is a myth. It's untrue. People that are not currently documented in our system are not going to be able to take advantage of Medicaid expansion. And so these things are myths that are just, they're steeped in lies and steeped in trying to confuse the voters about who this actually does benefit.
Okay, so thank you. So Lori, is glad to have you back with us. I know that this is a very busy day for you with tomorrow is election day and you are juggling a lot of balls. So we thank you so much for making the time to be with us. And we know that you and your team are very busy. So let's you'd have you share with us what voters need to know about tomorrow. So over the past few days, President Trump has been stoking fear and making unsubstantiated claims that mail-in voting will result in widespread fraudulent voting. And the data just don't support his claims. So my first question to you is this: what do voters need to do to ensure that their mail-in ballots get counted tomorrow? I know that one thing you're going to say is they should have already mailed them, but tomorrow and in November, because you know we've got another big election in November. And what are the procedures for absentee voting? Okay. So if you can talk about that, and then I want to come back and have you talk about what's going on tomorrow.
Okay, first I'll answer your first question. The first question you asked was, what do voters need to know? Well, the first thing is that voter fraud, I've been here going on almost 9 years, and I've only seen 3 voter fraud cases, and of those 3, 2 of them were candidates. So that's a blatant lie. Our problem in Kansas City is people don't vote. 4 years ago, it was 17% was the turnout for the last primary election in 2016. So voter fraud, our issue is that people don't show up. So that's just point blank. That's not our issue. Secondarily, you ask, what will they see tomorrow? Tomorrow we have 50 polls. We've added, in June we had 28. We have 50 now. In November, hopefully we'll be at, well, I know for a fact we'll be able to get up to 75 because the school district has made Election Day a holiday. So thanks to Dr. Bedell and Dr. Darrell Davis, they've allowed the teachers and also the teachers union work with them, and they voted on it as well. So without them, we wouldn't be able to pull it off. We have 50 polls, as I said, and we are practicing extreme social distancing, 6 feet apart. We have line walkers that will walk up with poll pads if the lines get long to ensure that everybody's in the system and their voter ID numbers are coming up, because we had a software developed, and it is the entire MCVR database for our jurisdiction, because we're no longer allowed to get on the Secretary of State's MCVR database. So therefore, we have a software, and the voter assistance specialist will assist anyone who may not come up in the initial poll pad, or just to check while they're in line. So if they do have some type of issue or challenge, that can be rectified before it's their turn. We have all the poll workers will be wearing masks. We actually this time have masks that we can give to voters if in fact they show up and they don't have masks. Now that was different last time. We barely had enough for ourselves, let alone to give away. So the polls open at 6. They close at 7 p.m. Now let's talk about absentee voting. The deadline for absentee was July 22nd. Absentee, most of the voters in Kansas City, the elders, they added a number 7. Absentee is, as it's always been, they just added the number 7, which deals with, I'm 65, I've been exposed to COVID, and there's 8 reasons under the 7th reason. So most people fall under number 2 or number 7. And those are the 2 that don't require a notary. Now the mail-in, the difference in the mail-in is that it has to be mailed in. Absentee, we can accept the absentee applications via fax, email, you can drop it off, but the mail-in, you have to literally mail in the ballot. It requires a notary, and it has to be in our office. It has to be in our office before 7 o'clock. I'm on a Zoom, I'm in a meeting.
Okay. Well, I got security on the phone and I can't find Jeremy, and they want to know if we've got a truck parked at Dock 2.
I don't know. You have to get, you got to get somebody else to do that. I can't do that right now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Nonetheless, we've got, yes. So the mail-in ballots, the challenge with that is that the Postal Service has been delivering our mail extremely late during the day. So what I've come up with a plan. So we do 2 pickups now. We do it at 11 and at 1:30, 2 o'clock. And if they have something after that that comes in, they're bringing it down to us. one of the challenges, and I just want to be completely transparent, what I found is that we've had a lot of applications that came back to us because it said no known address. And I know good and well that Palestine Gardens has been there forever. I've been through this before. But I found out that there's a lot of casuals. That's what they call their seasonal employees, casuals that are just being lazy. So the post office is currently investigating that, because I noticed that it only happened with our senior centers. So last week, my counterpart and I, we spent the week delivering ballots because we didn't want people to not be able to vote, because the Postal Service said it's not an address, and it's always been an address. They're on the permanently disabled. But the mail-in is a problem. The best part about the mail-in is that it has until 7 o'clock. We have voted several COVID people who've tested positive for COVID today. So we do have a procedure. They do have to call in and give us a specific time, because we won't have the manpower to do this over and over and over again here at the station on election day. But if COVID positive voters would like to vote, they'll have to come down, or someone can come down to Union Station. And if we have a team available, we will go out and vote them. But they can't call at 5:30 and need to be voted.
So if a person has a mail-in ballot and they haven't mailed it today, I mean, can they show up? They cannot show up and vote anywhere else? If they had to
This
mail
is
it in and then
Pastor Lindsay's online. Could you get you to hold on 1 second? It's Pastor Lindsay. I got to make sure I got a poll. This is Lori. Yes, do we have the poll or what? What's going on?
Okay, so while we're waiting for Lori, let's go on and finish doing the conversation.
Yes.
That about Medicaid expansion, and you're muted, Lori. You're unmute. You need to unmute, Lori. You're muted.
I unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay, I'm so sorry. I'm losing a poll at the same time, miscommunication. This is typically why I don't do this on the day before election, but I had to honor you all with this. Mail-in ballots, they have to be in tomorrow at 7. Now, they can't, a mail-in ballot can't be surrendered at the poll like an absentee ballot can be. So that's where it gets tricky. Mail-in ballots have to come through the mail. So that's why I encourage everybody to just use an absentee and use 2 or 7. And that's what we need to remember for November, 2 or 7.
Yeah, I think this is really important for going forward. There's nothing we can do about
Absolutely.
it for tomorrow, and we'll have additional conversations going forward, because it's really important. This is important to protecting the vote. These
Absolutely.
are the things that we were extremely concerned about under the Trump administration going into this election year, is that he will be making every attempt possible to steal the vote. I mean, so in a number of ways, or to obstruct voting. And so it's been somewhat, the communication around absentee and mail-in voting has been pretty confusing for the average voter. Talk about, I know I voted early. So we want people to know also going into November, what about early voting? So you guys are down there and you can walk in.
We're here 6 weeks beforehand. So absentee has been open for 6 weeks. We're here Monday through Friday. And the Saturday before the election, we're here from 8 to noon. So Union Station, most of the tenants have moved out, so it's a ghost town. So it's really safe to come down here and vote. And that's what a lot of people have chosen to do based on the mail situation. So last week alone, we had over 1,000 people come to the office and vote.
I was one of those people.
Yes. So it's picked up considerably.
Yes.
Now what's on the ballot? We've got the governor, the lieutenant governor race. We've got the Secretary of State. We've got the Attorney General, State Treasurer, Jackson County Prosecutor, Sheriff, committeemen for wards 1 through 20 and 22 through 26, and committee women races for the same wards. Constitutional Amendment 2, of course, we've talked about that. Medicaid expansion, and Hickman Mills. Some voters will have the Hickman Mills question C1.
Okay, so what do people do if they don't know where to vote? What should they do?
They can go to www.kceb.org, look in the left-hand corner. It's called Voter Lookup, and it's right there flashing. And they can enter their last name and their date of birth and their actual sample ballot that they will actually vote on. There are 504 different ballot styles. Their sample ballot will come up. I encourage them to print it out if they can, or if they don't have access to a printer, write the names down so that they know who they're voting for, because the ballot is specific to their ward and precinct. So that's a feature that we have on our website now.
Okay, and so I voted early. I can tell you that on that ballot, all of those things that you named are on the front of the ballot. When
Yes.
you get to the bottom of the ballot, flip that baby over and vote yes,
yes,
for Medicaid
yes, it's on the
expansion.
Medicaid
Vote
expansion.
Yes on Amendment 2. That's very important. So if you're looking at that and you're wondering, how do I vote for Medicaid expansion? It's on the back side of the ballot. So don't leave before you do that. Okay.
And take those with you. If you do have access to a printer, take that with you. Use that as your guide to vote. And one of the poll workers will discard it after you leave. It's perfectly fine.
So can we vote at any polling site now under these
Yes, they're
circumstances?
centralized.
Okay.
They're centralized. We had to decrease the number of, well, we didn't have many to choose from, but they're called central polls. So we mailed out what's called an election notification card, and the election notification cards went out a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. They were mailed out on a Saturday, and most of them hit from my understanding. It has your home ward, because what we have is two polls per ward. So at your home ward, if you're one of those people that requires voting on a pre-printed paper ballot, you have to go to your home ward, because we can't have 504 ballot styles at every single poll. So if you don't mind voting on the ballot marking device, which is just as safe, you can pull over and vote. If you're on the way from the store and you're not in your area, you can pull over and vote as long as you're in Kansas City.
So with the safety protocols, and I know if you come in and you do a paper ballot and you go and you slide it into the machine, do you have to wait for them to sanitize everything after each vote, or I mean,
well, there's sanitizing teams. There's sanitizing teams on site that they will do that. And we've got new equipment now. We've got wands, we've got UV wands, and we've gotten kind of high tech now. I just got my I got my new necklace here. This is a sanitizer too. It's a necklace. Oh. And it sanitizes the air in front of me so that when I'm at the poll. So if you guys aren't hip to them, they're calling me the Corona Queen because I've researched everything. So you might want to get one of these.
Okay. So if a person wants to vote today,
come on down. No, absolutely.
They can come down to the Union Station
till 5 o'clock.
Till 5 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you hear that, folks? You can go vote now. You don't have to worry about a crowd in the morning. You can vote until 5 o'clock today.
And there's nobody here right now, so it would be a really good time.
This is a good time to walk in and vote. No waiting. Yes. I voted there. All the safety protocols are in place. I felt very safe, and everything was great. So I encourage you to get out and vote. But please, if you haven't mailed in your ballot, you got to show up at the polls, either today at Union Station or at some of the polling locations. Can you name some of the polling locations, Lori? Just here in the inner city, in the 3rd district, at what schools, churches?
I sure can. 3rd district, there is Robert J. Mohart Multipurpose Center. There's Mount Sinai. That's one of the ones I almost lost this morning.
Okay.
Those are the 2 for the 3rd district. For the 5th district, we've got All Souls Church, Roanoke Community Center. Matter of fact, we've got all the community centers.
Oh, all
Brush
the
Creek,
Parks and Rec
Southeast.
centers?
Yes, yes. And they're in the gymnasium as well.
Okay, so
we've got Paseo Academy, Paseo Visitation Church, Warnell Road Baptist Church, Hale Cook Elementary School. We had them last time. The Waldo Library has been gracious enough to open up for us because they're closed. Christ the King, Elks Lodge, Garrison Community Center, Sons of Columbus Meeting Hall. We've got Gladstone Elementary School, Northeast High School, J.A. Rogers, Trailwoods Elementary School.
So is there a way for our audience to access that full list? Is that on the KCEB board on your website?
Yes, they can go to
KCEB.
yes, they can go to kceb.org and go to elections, and it says poll log, and they can pull down the entire poll log.
Excellent. So basically, there's no reason anyone cannot vote tomorrow.
There's no reason.
Number of locations across the city, and the polls open at, what was that time again?
6 o'clock.
6
a.m. and close at 7. That's correct. And we're open tomorrow as well. They can come down here.
So do you anticipate that because of mail-in voting, that we're going to have a delay in getting voting results?
No, we're working on it right now. We have 5 days before the election that we can start the ballot prep. So they'll all be run tomorrow.
So I don't have to
we've
stay
got
up
teams
tomorrow night to know that Medicaid expansion is a reality, right? Yay!
Right. I don't think that you'll have to wait that long. And what I say is because I always mention this, because on Fridays at noon, that's when the military and overseas votes have to be in. So the unofficial results that you get on election night are unofficial, but you will those votes don't typically change the outcome.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I, was just hoping that we would know by, basically, if everybody shows up and votes. When did the early returns start coming in? What,
about 8 o'clock.
About 8, 9 o'clock.
Yes.
We should be able to have a virtual celebration that Medicaid expansion passed, right? That's what we should be doing. Right?
Yeah, well, that's the goal.
Okay. All right.
But I got to make sure I got a poll. I hate to run, guys, but,
no, but thank you so much
you're
for
welcome.
getting that information. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And there's no reason not to vote. You need to vote like your ancestors died for it, guys.
Yes.
It's serious.
So
all right.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right. So let's move on. Let's get back to Medicaid, to this Medicaid expansion. I want to talk more now about activism and how we take the battle from the street to the ballot box. So Reverend Williams and Reverend Dr. Howard were part of that fight. That activism started, as Cecilia mentioned, that it actually started in 2011. And I think this conversation can be very educational and very instructive relative to the work that goes into from taking a civil rights movement or taking activism from the very, the effort out in the street, the protesting, to actually getting policy change. So you all started in this fight more than 10 years ago. But back in 2014, a group of some 300 protesters converged on the Senate chambers in the state of Missouri in Jefferson City. So 23 of you were arrested and convicted of misdemeanor trespassing, and 16 of you were subsequently pardoned by Governor Nixon. So the 2 of you were there. You all engaged in direct action. You disrupted the Missouri Senate. It has taken 6 years since that point in time for us to move that activism to the ballot box. So on that, talk a little bit about that day. What do you want young protesters to learn from that experience? And then, I'd like for each of you to kind of take a pass at that. And then let's talk with KJ and Melissa and Cecilia about that. Who's gonna go first? Vernon, or I'll let Vernon, you go first. Reverend Howard. Turn your mic on.
Thank you, Gwen. It's a pleasure to share the platform with you and Urban League and the rest of our colleagues and partners here. And for over 60 years, SCLC here in America has been challenging systems of racism, of voter suppression, in fact, voter negation, and other forms of oppression against Black people, Indigenous people, people of color. And here in Kansas City, since 1974, we've been doing it through the branch here in Kansas City. I'm proud to serve as president here of the local chapter. And one of the things that has been important to SCLC over the years, and certainly was important to our civil disobedience action in 2014, was that faith requires that we be in this space, that we cannot claim to be Christian people or any other form of faith, believing in God, who is a God of justice and mercy and fairness and compassion, and then not allow that kind of faith to bring us to this space and place where our brothers and sisters, where our neighbors are being denied the rightful access to quality health care, such as is what is happening in the state of Missouri. This is our faith obligation from our standpoint. This is our moral obligation. This is the answer. This is love operating through the dispensary of justice. And we have to do that as people of faith. You asked a question about 2014. One of the things we had to ask ourselves then, it was 4 years after the passage of the Affordable Care Act. President Obama had been courageous, the congressional colleagues had been courageous in getting ACA passed, and still in the state of Missouri, 4 years later in 2014, it was not a reality. We asked the question to legislators on that day, how can you possibly, in good conscience, continue to vote for a budget that provides you your own personal wealth, safety, and health, and then deny the constituents that you represent that same quality of health care? It's sinful, it's wrong, it's evil, it's bad policy, and we were determined to change it. And so we engaged in a civil disobedience action that would dramatize that issue, raise the consciousness level, and hopefully bring others on to align with us in that effort.
Reverend Williams.
Yes, I like to concur with Dr. Howard on several points. First of all, one of the reasons that I participated in the civil disobedience is because on Sunday after Sunday, I'm preaching from a Black liberation theology. And unless you're able to take that to the public square, I don't believe what you're preaching on Sunday mornings is legitimate. So this was once again a way to legitimize the ministry that God has given me by going out into the public square. Secondly, I would like to say that when we look at that situation that happened a few years ago when we did the civil disobedience, a lot of strategic planning went into it. A lot of planning went into it. And we did planning so far as to how people needed to conduct themselves when approached by officers. Because if you conduct yourself in the wrong way, not only you get a misdemeanor, but you can get a felony charge, you can get a charge as assaulting an officer. And so we made sure that everybody knew what they needed to do, how they needed to do it. I will also say to our young protesters that one of the things I would hope that you would remember, and that is this system in America is working the exact way the founding fathers of the system has designed it to work. So don't go into a situation thinking that the system is broken. Now the system is working the way that the system needs to work, that they want the system to work. And that the only thing we're going to get is what we are prepared to organize to take. If we are not preparing ourselves to organize to take a lot, then we're not going to get a lot, because power is never conceded unto us. We have to take that power. And I would also like to say that one of the things that is impressing me, really impressing me about our younger generation is the radical nature that they have. And when I'm speaking about radical, I'm speaking about radical from the point that Marcus Garvey spoke about radicalism, when he said radicalism is a consistent, continuous struggle and fighting for the freedom of your people. And I see that fighting you. And I also see what Abraham Lincoln was talking about in his second inaugural address, when he says sometimes it requires one to destroy what they have before they can build anew. And so I just thank our young people for destroying or attempting to destroy what we have to build a new and a better system that they're going to benefit from as well as their children.
Yes, I agree with both of you gentlemen wholeheartedly. And I am truly inspired by the young protesters and how they've shown up and the energy and passion that they brought to the battle for justice. So, you know, in 1903, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. So here we are in the 21st century, and the problem of the color line and the problem of structural racism remains. So on July 17th, the late Congressman John Lewis wrote an essay to the young generation, to the young protesters, in essence, passing the torch. And so I'd like to just read a passage from that essay, and I'd like to have KJ and Melissa respond. And he wrote, "While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to witness it for myself after many years of silent witness. The truth is still marching on." And then he goes on to write about how Emmett Till was his George Floyd, how his Rayshard Brooks and Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor. Emmett Till was his George Floyd. So Melissa and KJ, as organizers, protesters, millennials, you know, what meaning does this essay have for you? Melissa.
If you don't mind. It has an exceptional meaning. First of all, to pen a letter to be read on the day of your funeral, to touch the communities which you have impacted and devoted your entire life to, simply gave me chills. And when you're dealing with a giant like John Lewis, who has had such a pivotal impact on our community and has lived such a big and full life, it's easy to take certain aspects of his life for granted. For example, it's easy to gloss over the fact that he was 19 years old when he went on the freedom rides, when he placed himself in that amount of dire danger at 19 years old to get into that good and necessary trouble that he's always preached about. And so to think that we as young people have inspired a man like that at such an early age, way before I even considered being civically engaged and becoming an activist and an organizer, to impress him and to inspire him is just further confirmation that what has happened recently in the latest wave of protests is not only necessary, but it must continue.
KJ.
As someone, I am 19 and really involved in the community. It's really a testament to the work that we're doing. And it's also, while it is honorable, it's sad that, you know, him as a 19-year-old, he was fighting for the same things and had to go through the same process that we're currently having to go through in 2020. So while it's important to, you know, honor his legacy, we also have to take a holistic viewpoint that this is a continual thing. Like, he was 19 years old, I'm 19 years old. And as I said, at Power and Light, at a speech I gave, hell will freeze over before my children are 19 and fighting for the same thing. So it's just really a blessing to be able to hear those words from him, but it's also disheartening to see how far we've come as far as years and as far as other strides have been made with voting and everything, but how it's a continual fight. And, you know, people are tired. We're tired of fighting. So even if that means sacrificing the joys and, you know, brunches and everything to go protest and getting missing monumental things, like, I'm willing to do that so that the next 19-year-old in 19 years doesn't have to do the same thing.
Oh my God, thank you so much for that. Thank you. So, Vernon, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Gwen, can I say that I think Ms. Johnson and KJ are just right on point. And one of the things that KJ mentioned is the continuum. And many people try to view from a broader analytical standpoint the civil rights movement in America. The civil rights movement started in 1619 in America. When we were brought here by force. Our civil rights movement is not 50 or 60 years old, and nor is there some civil rights movement that was 8, 10, 12 years ago that SCLC and many of our organizations, Urban League and NAACP, were so deeply entrenched in. This has been a 400 plus year civil rights movement and battle. And I think that speaks also to KJ's point and Ms. Johnson's point about we have to avoid pop-up political engagement. We have to avoid being there one day and not being there next. And Medicaid expansion and police brutality, in my opinion, are two of the illustrations of such. They are the epitome of illustrations of such, because we get arrested 6 years ago, and now we have the opportunity to go to the ballot in 2020. If you think about it with respect to police brutality, still KCPD has not, no, that's not the topic of our discussion today, but Gwen, I know you're still on fire about it. I know I am. And I know Ms. Johnson and are still on fire about it. Still, there's nothing done on the 8 can't wait. That's why we're talking about hitting it again continually in a mass way on August the 28th as we assemble and come around a decision and some consensus to make that happen, because it is something that requires a great amount of endurance and giving one's life to. And that is quite a sacrifice to make. And so I am so encouraged by KJ and Ms. Johnson, without a doubt.
So I want to get to I just want to continue this. So I want to read a little bit more from Congressman Lewis's essay. And he wrote, ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, as Melissa mentioned, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. So various studies report that millennials, 18 to 35-year-olds, have the lowest voter turnout of any age group. Even though they show up at much higher rates in presidential elections, they are not using their power at the ballot box. They also show up in larger numbers in the front line of these protests. And so we need to merge this conversation. You're so right, Reverend Howard, when we talk about the struggle, and it started more than 400 years ago. And the difference I see is that from some of those who were young people in that civil rights struggle, who were on the front lines, who did sit in, who did get tear gas, but we certainly showed up at the polls because we were fighting so vigorously for the right to have access to the franchise. And so to not show up for us would be it was disrespectful of the lives that were lost and the work that was done. And so to our millennials, you've been involved in voter registration drives. You've been out on the front lines of the protests. And so voter registration is not a problem. Voting is a problem, right? So we got, and when I've looked at data in Kansas City, if Black people showed up in the numbers that are already on the voting polls, we wouldn't have to be worried about getting Medicaid expansion, getting rid of an abusive police chief, reallocating funds, because we would hold power where we need to hold it through our vote. So can you tell me, young folks, in 2016, millennials made up 31% of the overall electorate, but only 12% of the voting pool. So how do we get them to actually vote? Because we know the passion is there. They'll show up out in the street and protest. What can we do, KJ?
Ms. Gwen, after our young people speak, I'd like to speak on that too. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to not necessarily refrain. I feel as if my generation gets kind of demonized for not voting. So I believe we all can recall the Stacey Abrams a gubernatorial election a few years ago in Georgia where Black people turned out in significant numbers, and it was still rigged, and she still lost her position in government. So I think instances like that can kind of dishearten younger people from voting, because it's like we all came out here. There were buses full of people. I grew up in Georgia, and I had friends who were on Instagram Live at voting polls for upwards of 5 hours, who simply couldn't afford to stay longer. So I feel like a lot of it is systemic. And when we see various attempts made over the past 50 years to enforce our societal change, and it's not being accomplished by voting, it can also play a huge part into why young people decide not to vote. Because if we feel like we're not getting the answers that we want and we need by voting, then people will stop voting. I don't think that's an excuse as to why we shouldn't vote, but I think that could answer to why we aren't voting at this moment. And, you know, voting, it takes a lot. You need a ride, you need the time and the money off. And we all can achieve that, but I think it's more of a communal issue and a systemic issue rather than an individual issue. Because if you know the time and the place, and, you know, you won't have to suffer financially for trying to get out and vote, then you'll go out and vote. But when you have a lot of things causing you not to vote, then that can play a huge part in it.
So, yeah, so well said, every bit of that, well said, KJ. Someone in the chat posted that a lot of of your generation believes that their vote simply doesn't matter. And so I want to make note of that so we can come back and address that. So Melissa, let us hear from you, and Cecilia, and then I want to address this issue of voting matters.
Absolutely. And just to kind of extend on what KJ was talking about some of the reasons why people are my age are reluctant to vote, Reverend Williams, that radicalism that you spoke about earlier, that you were so inspired to see in the young people, it is a double-edged sword, because nowadays a lot of people are withholding their vote as a form of protest in and of itself. I know that there's a common theme, especially amongst Black Democrats, is that for so long the Democratic Party has held the Black population. They've taken us for granted. They haven't really come up with clear platforms and clear agendas to progress our community forward. They just always knew that we would be there in their back pocket and in their corner. Now people are really using their platforms to make solid demands and hear why exactly we should vote for the Democratic presidential candidate, for example. I understand that train of thought, but you always saw 4 years ago where that got us. Yes, you might not have been in love with Hillary, but I'm sure that you would have elected to have the other option today than 4 years than right. You felt 4 years ago. So I think that we have to as young people, have to get away from the train of thought that withholding our vote is a form of protest. That does not move our collective ball forward at all. You have to utilize your vote. You have to use it as a tool, not withhold it. Also, there just has to be a general paradigm shift in how young Black people view voting. We're having a renaissance going on in our community right now. We're focusing on entrepreneurship, financial literacy, all of these other big ticket topics that are really going to progress us forward as a whole. But for some reason, voting hasn't really become part of those categories that we must be engaged with in order to be good, civically engaged young Black people. And I think we change that by really boiling down how voting, especially in local elections, does benefit you. I know I've had numerous conversations with some friends that I grew up with in the inner city. Look, if you feel like the prosecutor didn't treat your homeboy fairly, vote about it. If you don't like how your children are being educated, vote about it. We don't always have to talk about elections in this very high level presidential way. The more impact to your daily life is going to come from the local election. And if you don't like the candidates that are on the ballot, vote in the primary. We don't vote in primaries. We don't choose our candidates that are going to go to the final race. And so we can't boo about it. We can't complain about it unless we vote about it, to steal one from our forever president, Barack Obama. We can't boo about it. We have to vote about it.
Absolutely.
I'll make a quick.
Yeah, but
I think while it's important that we also have to realize that we only make up 13% of the population of the United States. So, you know, we should make a conscientious effort to vote. I believe education also plays a huge part in voting, and why these bills and different forms of legislature are written so inaccessibly is to prevent people from voting. If you can't understand, or you don't, if hypothetically, I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and I fortunately had parents at home who instilled strong academic values into me, but at school it was blatant that certain people did not get those. They didn't have understanding of grammar structure and everything like that. But if you systemically cause a group of people to underperform in school and they don't understand what they're reading, then it's so much easier to not vote if you don't understand what this bill is about, or what it'll cover, or what's at stake. So I feel like while it's important that we take personal responsibility for not voting, a lot of why we don't vote is blatant systemic racism and treatment of our people as well.
And on that
I
note,
think,
I'm sorry, really quickly. On
I'm
that
sorry,
note,
y'all go ahead.
miseducation is also a form of voter suppression. Just to kind of piggyback on what you were talking about, KJ, for example, I just had a voter registration vibe that was tailored directly for felons with Barbara Washington, who's running for state senate, because there has not been clear messaging from the top down that if you are off papers, if you have served your probation term, and if you have served your prison sentence, you can vote. Riding with that overarching theme that, oh, I'm just a felon, I can't vote. If you don't combat that with education, then that is a form of voter suppression. But we as young people, we also have to stop relying on social media for all of our news. We have to, because you will see, you'll scroll and you'll keep scrolling another state. It very well might be the case that if you have a felony conviction, you cannot vote. But in Missouri, if you take it upon yourself to research and educate yourself, you will know that that is not the case. So I think that we also, just to kind of get to the systematic factors that prevent people from voting, we can combat those through education and disseminating that within our own communities.
Okay, Cecilia.
Thank you, Ms. Gwen. One of the things I would like to say too is, like, everybody has given much food for thought for us moving forward. And I want to go back to one of the things that both Reverend Rodney and Dr. Howard talked about, which was the discipline that it takes to move from direct action to then policy change. And one of the things, like, I, as an activist and one who has been boots on the ground for quite a while, if we are not doing things to move us to policy change, then actions are nothing but ways in which we feel good with ourselves about joyous rebellion. The actions that took place with Medicaid 23, the joyous rebellion there led to policy change in which we are moving forward. When I'm thinking about my space on the Yes on 2 campaign, the broader campaign might not be thinking about this as a civil rights issue, but I think about it as a civil rights issue. I think about it as a chip away at the health disparities that we are moving, that have been in our communities for decades, right? I think of it as a way in which we are able to provide systemic change in the terms of healthcare and access to affordable care. And I think that is one of the things, as a person who is situated pretty center between elders and young folks, right? So I understand that urgency that the elders have, and I understand the different urgency that young people have. I do think that we have to become insistent upon our engagement. And I think the excuses that we can give ourselves about all of these different things that we know are systemic changes, that we still must be able to show up and then shift policy. If we're only showing up because it feels good to show up and because we're flexing on social media, which happens a lot, because true activists and anarchists who are trying to change things at the root, that's what Angela Davis says, that radicalism is nothing but snapping something off at the root. If we really want to snap this stuff off at the root, then we are recognizing that it needs to be someone working at the grassroots level, it needs to be someone working at the grass tops level, and then we need to also have people in the middle. So when we are talking about access to voting, like, it's one of the things I wanted Lori to get into. We have to do the things that those of us who have places at the table, must make sure that we do the things where some states have all mail-in ballots. Some states have where you can vote on your phone. Some states have all the different ways in which they have removed barriers and voter suppression that we are not organizing in the mid-range level for young people to not have any excuses not to vote anymore, right? So we can talk about, I agree with KJ that young folks have been demonized about not voting. I also think that we have not provided continual agitation for those of us who are at the tables of how we can make voting easier, less challenging, and without barriers. And we need to do all of that so that we can move this policy. It's taken 10 years to get Yes on 2 on the ballot. Citizens of Missouri took that into their own hands and gathered 350,000 signatures to make that happen, only needed 175. But it's only because of that grassroots activism that we see with young people now. What are the policies we're going to change, whether that's going to be, please, criminal justice reform, please rooting that out at that space, but in all the different ways that we can do that so that we can move policy. And it's our job to make sure that we're making it easier rather than more challenging and harder for people to vote.
So let me just add to that in fact, number of our organizations have been working, which still speaks to the importance of the vote, because the ability to advance policy changes resides in who is sitting in the seats of policy making. So we can do what you said all day long, Cecilia, if it's just, the Missouri legislature is a case in point. We have a crimson red, very conservative legislature. So policy efforts, it's very difficult to move a policy agenda, even from the inside. The same holds true if we look at it from a national level, where we have a House of Representatives, where we have a majority, a Democratic majority, and a Senate where we have a Republican majority. In years past, democracy worked fine under those with the two-party system. And our representatives were able to make deals or reach compromises for the benefit of the people who elected them. That seems to be, that is much more difficult today. So a number of initiatives nationally and locally have been put forward to address voting rights, to protect voting rights, but because of who's in office, it's very difficult to advance them. I think a lesson learned here is one that speaks to what Reverend Howard said earlier. It's about endurance, because the system requires it. And what we need from all of us who are committed to the change is that we work collectively, collaboratively, because if it's a long fight. We will win battles along the way, but the war is not over. And while we are still at war, then we have to know that we have to fight on multiple fronts strategically. A strategic approach means that we're battling from all ends, and there's room for everybody on the battlefield of justice. There's room for everyone to show up and fight. So I want to address one other thing from John Lewis's essay, and then Vernon, I see you chomping at the bit. Okay, and I'm gonna let you get in here with that. But I want to get this in so we can go with this. And so, because I think it kind of ties to this. His message in his last message was so powerful. So he also wrote that you must also study and learn the lessons of history, because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. We talked about building union, and that's what we have to do. And we have done to some extent, but I think there's a whole lot of room for improvement locally for our struggles here in Kansas City. So Reverend Howard and Reverend Williams, I'm gonna come to you because last week, I think it was a week ago, our civil rights organization signed on to an open letter that was drafted by these young protesters. It was brilliant, it was powerful, it was radical, it was hard hitting, and we all signed on to that letter without question, without editorializing it, without trying to edit in any way. We signed on. So, and then the message was about restructuring the city budget, reducing funding or defunding KCPD and a number of other things. But it was a strong, hard-hitting message. So what did you want to say, Reverend Howard, before
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the vote, and I was listening to, or I should say, reading one of the comments that someone had mentioned. I'm paraphrasing. Our generation believes that our vote does not matter. Yeah. And I think we have to. I want to challenge us to look a little bit differently in that, and to examine Medicaid expansion as, again, a current illustration of how voting does matter. There would be no ACA, no opportunity for Medicaid expansion, if in fact Black people in great numbers, probably historically true, didn't come out and vote for Mr. Barack Obama to be president of the United States of America. We are in a position to expand Medicaid for a lot of people in our community because we voted for a particular president. Having said that, I think we have to sharpen our expectations with regards to voting to understand that it is not the panacea. It's the fight within us that is the panacea. It's the determination to be free that is the panacea. And sometimes the activity of voting is going to be more fruitful than at other times, but that doesn't mean that we don't stop doing it. Let me say this in terms of locally here in Kansas City. We have to match voting then with conscious, true, freed up elected officials. We need people in office that are already free before they get there. We need clergy and ministers who are free to speak truth to power and are not concerned and worried about what their congregation members think, or on the standpoint of elected officials, what the people who voted for them think about what their decisions are right now. We have had 2 African-American mayors over the course of the last 9 years in this city. We have had an African-American chief of police, and we have a great number of brown and Black people in positions of power in this community. And yet, with police brutality, still none of the 8 can't wait have been implemented in this city. We have a problem with systemic and structural racism, and Black people are a part of that. Let us then not be a part of the complicity, if you will, with that. So it's going to be voting and more. Strategic alliances, intergenerational unity. What would happen if the power behind all of our organizations that are concerned about freedom come together and say, we are demanding this or else? And Ms. Johnson and KJ, there's some things that we can withdraw from the power structures in Kansas City to get movement in this city on our agenda. So we encourage each other, hold on to our vote. Don't withdraw that, keep that. But there are some things that we can withdraw. We can withdraw our money. We can withdraw our buying dollars. We can withdraw our advertising dollars that we provide for people. We can withdraw our consumer money that we spend. There's a great amount of things that we can withdraw. And I encourage us to keep this conversation going, to mobilize the power of withdrawal. It is a major piece that we can actually execute.
But don't withdraw the vote, because.
But don't withdraw the vote. No.
Use the vote. The vote.
Use the vote.
The vote is the weapon.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you showed up and voted for a city council member and they're not doing what you need them to do, or you voted for a mayor, I don't care if he's Black, white, or brown, and they're not doing what you wanted them to do, then you can do what? You can get petitions signed. You can recall a person. Did you know, with your vote? But they don't fear your ability to do that, because you know what they say? Oh, they don't vote. They look at the voting numbers. They look at who's showing up at the polls. And so they go, oh, the young people, they'll just protest, but they won't vote. You know, so it's not an indictment against young people about voting from me and us. It's like, we need your voice at every level. We need your voice at every level. So
I
to
think our generation really
yeah,
plays into a lot of the direct action, which is really needed because, people can only take so much protesting in Westport. People can only go 12 nights without having to hear Black Lives Matter before they start to put pressure on elected officials. They're like, they've been out there protesting 30 days, 30 nights now. Like, my children have to sleep. My husband has a corporate job to go to before. So I feel like we contribute on every level. We definitely have to start getting to the polls more. That's definitely, but there's 12 ways of skinning a cat. Everybody plays a role in this movement, and a lot of young people, we just haven't seen the results that we wanted from voting. So we're resorting to direct action. And, if you won't change this, we're coming to your house. And I would love to see a lot of that energy that we put into, let's go protest at the mayor's house, or let's go protest here and let's go protest there for the ballot. So that's definitely something that I believe that we all could work on. It's not palatable at this moment. It's not cool. What's cool is being at these direct actions and getting tear gas and, although insane, having cops trying to arrest you, that's cool. But I feel like the conversation definitely, like, it's all needed, but we definitely can do more. And with the Black officials, I definitely understand the need for us to, elect people who have our best interests. But we see that sometimes, not all skin folk are kinfolk. So we're definitely going to work through that because, we have very high expectations for people who look like us. We expect a certain decorum. We think of, all the things that our ancestors have been through and assume certain things about their experiences that may not be true. So in lieu of skin color, because I was very much so a skin color oriented person, if you're Black, I'm voting for you. I'm going to start taking a direct look at policy. And I would like to encourage any other young people who are watching to do that, because again, all skin folk are not kinfolk. All the people who look like you may not always have your best interests at heart. I see that play out every day in society. So we definitely have to start, all the young people who are watching this, we definitely have to start mobilizing more and, making ourselves heard outside of City Hall, voting and protesting, because both are needed, definitely.
yeah, and you're so right about that. And because we have very, a lot of concerns right now about our leadership, with the mayor and with the board of police commissioners. We're very much concerned, and the letter that you guys wrote and we signed on to, calling for the mayor to lead, calling for the mayor to take a stand, to take a position. And we want answers to those same questions, right? So, so KJ, can you go on and just give us a little bit more information about why your group of you all reached out and asked us to join with you, and we appreciated that invitation because we appreciate everything that you guys are doing out there, and we feel that we want to build a stronger coalition between the civil rights organizations and the protests, the movement, and so to create a movement that combines all of our groups. So tell us, why did you feel it was important? Why did you guys feel it was important? And what's next? The letter's out there. The mayor hasn't responded that we know of. What's next? What should we be doing next from you guys' perspective?
To touch on what Reverend Vernon said, the kind of intergenerational connection is extremely important to us as an organization because, while what we're doing is getting attention and we have that media attention, it's important to pay homage to those who have been doing this for the past 50 years and trying and, may have not had the people and the influence that, we have as younger people who have social media and who have kind of built up clout, as they call it, from all of this. We're getting a lot of attention that, a lot of older people or even older organizers have been trying to, garner for over 50 years, and they haven't been able to. So that's why we reached out, and we just wanted it to be a cohesive thing. People have a tendency to look, it's called the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the more groups that we have signing on, the less amount of people that Mayor Lucas has to run to for a backup, or, he
Talk,
has
sister.
to all of us.
Talk, talk, sister.
He has to answer all of us. He can't just say, well, the NAACP doesn't support. Yes, they do. They signed on. The Urban League doesn't support. Yes, they do. We all want answers from you. And if you're not going to provide those, we will be willing to take your power away from you. So you have to answer to all of us because we're all saying the same thing, which is why I'm so glad that all of us were able to work in conjunction to really get our message out and to let him know that we're here and we're demanding answers. And, we see what you're doing from every level. You can't say that it's only older people watching you, even the younger people. I'm 19, I'm watching you. So what are you going to do? You have no avenues to run to. You have no one to hide behind. So it's kind of that outing process. So I'm hoping for possibly in the near future, we're hoping to get a straight answer out of Mayor Lucas, because he did condemn, or he agreed with the other mayors of major cities about them not choosing to have the federal, I'm sorry, I have to be really careful about my words here. He agreed with their decision not to have the federal agents. Meanwhile, he's allowing federal agents. So we definitely, that plays a major part into voting, and we definitely have to start getting our propaganda out about, this is who we're voting for. While we're trying to vote Black and we're trying to support our community, this is who he's hurting our community while he's claiming to be a part. He was kneeling with protesters. I remember the first weekend of the George Floyd protest, I came home and my grandmother, she was like, Mayor Lucas, he was out there with the young folk. Did you see him? Did you see him at all? He had on a suit. And I was like, Gmo, I was organizing with the young folk and I didn't see Mayor Lucas at all. So it's about direct action and voting. And, we see your points and what you won't do or will do for us. So we're going to act accordingly, but we're also going to put pressure on you through our direct actions, because a lot of people see them as young people expressing angst and just out there trying to be loud and have something to do. It means so much more than that to me. It's us forcing ourselves to be seen, because a letter is a beautiful penmanship. It's a beautiful work of art to express how we feel. But when we're at your front door at City Hall demanding that you come out, and you can't go out to Subway and get your lunch, you can't go to Starbucks because you're scared for whatever reason, then it's a certain amount of power in that. So we are really going to continue with our direct actions, definitely, because they are making an impact.
Well, good. Don't stop until you get, that's the whole thing. Like, you want to, in a movement is continuous. So you can have actions or very, or moments in time, but a movement is continuous. You don't let up. And so we just want to coordinate the fight with you, because you have to hit them from all ends. You gotta hit them on social media. You gotta have the protests. You gotta have other media. You gotta show up and have conversations. You gotta do it all. But the change will come because once you sign in for the long haul, it's a movement. It doesn't stop until we get to the other side. So we support you, Urban League. I'm speaking for myself. Urban League supports you, and I know that my colleagues
NAACP supports you.
Support you. We want
KJ knows we support them because we were talking with Black Rainbow over the weekend.
Yeah.
And so they know they've got our support. I want to say something else, Gwen, when you're done.
Yeah, so we've had these conversations with Black Rainbow, and we're working to putting together a joint meeting, and we welcome other protest groups to join in that effort. As I said before, this movement it's a big tent. So I remember back during the Civil Rights Movement, there was always a big tent, and everybody was welcome under that tent. And you did your thing, we did our thing, but we were all working towards that common goal. And that's what we need to do a better job of here. But you guys are doing a great job. And one thing that one of my mentors always taught me, that if better is possible, then good is not good enough. That every day I got to try to be better this day than I was the day before. So if we're going to do that, then we got to come together and work on strategy so we can get to the other side. We have a mayor that is duplicitous. He tries to work all angles. What he said to you one day, he's saying to somebody else something different the next day. That's not acceptable.
And thank y'all for y'all signing on. That means a lot. Because even though like we appreciate it, it's just so like it truly hurts my heart. Like we had a protest the second weekend, and it was someone there who was old enough to be my grandmother, and she was really hot, and she had her grandson, and she wanted to stop. And it was honestly like the most disheartening thing I've seen thus far, is that, you know, we still have elders who were back in the 1960s on the streets doing the exact same thing, and I'm literally walking beside her trying to give her water. And it's so, if this is a multi-generational fight, and this is a continual fight. I'm here for this is a movement, this is not a moment. And you know, we had a beautiful moment a few months ago when Nike, Disney, all of these major corporations had to finally, for the one time, and everyone had to acknowledge. I was getting random emails from Target and companies who I hadn't even shopped from in years, who were having to acknowledge the impact of racism that they've made and that everyone has made on Black people in America. So we're starting to get somewhere, but a lot of this generation in particular is so focused on the movement, the moment, and being here and getting that picture. And then when it's time to go home, and you know, it's now 2 months after that, and we're not getting 500 people out, we're getting 100 people out. So we definitely just have to keep maintaining our goal, our end goal.
So there were some questions. I mean, there have been some comments in the, Reverend Williams, did you want to add anything while I look here? There were some comments in the.
Yes, the only thing I would like to add is that I agree with what has been said on today, that we just have to be more conscious to be intergenerational. And for the older generation, especially, not to think that we have all of the answers, and to be willing to step aside and allow young people to lead. And I think once we get to that place, I think we're in a very good place that's going to solidify our future in the years to come.
Which is exactly why when we got the letter, there was no way I was going to try to edit or do anything. It's like, this is you all are leading. We support you. We're happy to be to sign on it. We want to hear. We want to listen. We want to support. Melissa.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just glad that Reverend Williams brought up some of the barriers that prevent intergenerational mobilizing to occur. And also to continue the intergenerational themes of this movement, we both, on both sides, millennials and our elders, we all have to get more creative with how we meet each other where we are. I know that myself and a couple of party promoters that wanted to kind of transfer their influence in the club to important issues like voting, we were trying to plan a big rally down on 18th and Vine, and all of the business owners gave us so much of a headache. And it was so discouraging because we were like, we're literally just trying to register people to vote and to inform people and educate people, but we got so much blowback. And on the flip side of that is like our radicalism, it can be our downfall sometimes. We have to also be open and palatable to learning about the history and what has worked and what has not worked in the past. So I think from both sides, from both perspectives, we have to do better at meeting where each other are so that we can continue to progress people forward.
That's a very, very good point. So we are approaching we're getting close to the end. And so I want to say to those listening, if you have questions, to put them in. There are a lot of statements in the chats and not questions in the Q&A. So let's see, wait a minute, there is one. Okay, so there's one, here's one. There can be so much info to stay aware of: policies, ballot topics, representatives, etc. Some websites or platforms don't share a full perspective, or the info shared is done in such a way where it seems like people have to read between the lines on what they're truly stating. Any thoughts on good and reliable platforms for people to do their research as it relates to voting on a breadth of topics and people? So research, that's a good question. There are a lot of platforms out there. In fact, today I was watching a program, now I'm trying to remember what network I was on, but there was an African-American gentleman who has a mobile application where you can do research on issues and you can do research on candidates. So I think it was on, it might have been on Good Morning America or ABC. I'm sorry, I can't tell you specifically, but what I'll say is you just really kind of want to search, do some searching for, there are a number of mobile applications. There's one out there that I would recommend, or a couple that I use, one of which through which you can do, oh gosh, where is it? There's one called Outvote. And Outvote is, or either of you familiar with it, it is an app for organizing and for helping to get out the vote. And it has, darn it, I'm just trying to go into it to get
Are you
the.
thinking of Politico? Because that's one where they explain in depth, like all the candidates, like what they believe for each issue, and it's like really synopsized into a palatable form on Politico. Yes, and Ballotpedia.
I'm so glad somebody just wrote Ballotpedia, because that's kind of what I use as my starting point. I think it very clearly kind of lays out who the candidates are, what the issues, what their important contested issues are, and then I use that as kind of like a roadmap to continue my research on other platforms like your traditional MSNBC, CNN, or even, you know, the candidate's website. I mean, of course, that's going to be painted in the most favorable light to them, but then you can still use that to catapult you to another area of the web, which
you can also use things like if people are wanting to be aligned, to make sure that the Black-centered and Black-led organizers are aligned with the overall arching movement. Movement for Black Lives.org has something for every state, so you'll know how this affects every state and what's moving forward. Ballotpedia, of course, those.
Okay, and then there's someone put in the chat, fastdemocracy.com. So, you know, all I can say is that it does require a lot of research, and some of it can be, you know, a little bit daunting to determine, you know, if it's politically motivated or if it's just, you know, if it's partisan in any way or if it's just fact-based. And so you do want to look at those things that'll give you both sides of the issues. And there are a number of those options out there. So now if we can just wrap this up with allowing each of you to make some parting comments. And so we have like, you know, like just a few minutes. So why don't we start with you, Reverend Williams, because you've been a little bit quiet this evening today. So why don't you, what words of wisdom do you want to leave with our audience today?
I'm going to leave with you a passage of scripture. And the passage of scripture is found in the book of Acts chapter 1, verse 8, and it says these words: "But ye shall receive power when the Holy Spirit is come upon you, and ye should be the witnesses of me in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." What I would suggest is this, that this is the downpouring of the Holy Spirit. We are seeing an outpouring of the Holy Spirit outside of the church, in Black Lives Matters, and all of our protesters, because they certainly are witnesses for what the Lord Jesus Christ would want. And he wants a community that's filled with justice, with peace, equity for all humanity. And I believe that is what God is using you to show, not just Kansas City, but to show America what the beloved community can look like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Back on what he's saying for my ending. I'm a strong believer in liberation theology, which is a part of Christianity, and it's this kind of belief that Jesus would be amongst the people.
Yes.
I encountered a man at the first weekend's protest who had him and his children that he takes care of are very prominent in the Westport area, and he was essentially condemning us for being out here. And I just made a really strong emphasis that, you know, this is not what God wanted for his people. So while it's easy to sit in the comfort and privilege of a church that's air conditioned and, you know, pray for the children of the earth and make these really general prayers, we're out here doing the work and ensuring that his will is seen and is heard by everyone. So I really appreciate that word from Reverend Williams, and that's important, that major multifacetedness of how we can also pray for better while working for better, because
Absolutely.
prayer without action is void. I'm not sure the scripture, but I've heard it a lot. Prayer without action is void. So it's important to do both.
Thank you. Melissa?
Yes, I just want to say to the young people listening out there that this movement, our future, is bigger than performative activism. If your place in this movement is simply taking a picture and posting and then going on with your everyday life without doing the necessary follow-up work to really progress this movement and our people forward, then really take a look in the mirror, because that picture is going to last for a couple of seconds. Our future, our children's future, is much bigger than that. And so just really bear down, dig in, and vote like your life depended on it, because it does.
Cecilia?
I want to say so much, but what I'm on this call to say today is vote yes on 2. Vote yes on 2. Vote yes on 2 tomorrow. It is our, I think, privilege and honor to be able to be present and to be able to be doing the things that our ancestors would have wanted for us to do. We're their wildest dreams, you all. And so for us to not behave as such, for us to not behave as if we are not standing on wonderful shoulders, for us to behave as if Ubuntu is not important, that means I am because you are, it's really a slap in the face there. And so vote yes on 2 tomorrow, so that we can chip away at these disparities that have plagued our communities. And I don't even want to say disparities, these injustices that have plagued our communities for decades. And let us come together, the elders, the young people, and everyone in between, those of us who have, those of us who have not. This is our fight for the justice. This is a new reconstruction period is what it is. And so we have to fight like people fought before if we want justice for everyone. Thank you for letting me be here today, Ms. Gwen.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Howard?
Well, I just wanted to make reference to both KJ and Dr. Williams. James Cone is considered perhaps the premier theologian and scholar with respect to Black theology. And he says it this way, and I'm paraphrasing, that Christianity is essentially a religion of liberation, and that Christ Jesus is the liberator. And we stand with the liberator, and the liberator, Jesus Christ, stands with us. And I want to say this before we go. We can better prevent the political maneuvering of elected officials who are talking out of both sides of their necks by positing the question of whose side are you on? That was the most profound question. KJ, Ms. Johnson, that was one of the most profound questions. Whose side are you on? And we I think can make an addendum to that and make sure that it's there. Are you on the side of justice, or are you on the side of oppression? When we say, are you on the side of this person or that person, we give somebody an out, and they will be able to run to a sympathizer. But if you're on the side of justice, then you're on the side of justice. And it does not matter who's on the other side. It doesn't matter. And so continue to do the great work. Gwen, thank you for pulling us together like this. And we praise God for everybody.
Thank you. So I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today. You all have done an outstanding job in shedding the light on these very important issues. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate and respect and honor the work of our young protesters. KJ, you showed up beautifully today. Melissa, we appreciate you both. And we thank you sincerely for that. And we have a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot of work to do together. So we're here to do this work. We're gonna get this done. I'm like you, KJ, I have 2 grandsons. One is 16 and one is 13. I don't want them to have to endure what I've endured. I want them to live in a world that is truly free and just. And so the work is, we're passing these batons to you guys, and I know you're prepared to handle it. So I'm going to leave you with Congressman Lewis's last paragraph from his essay, which reads, "When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, Let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Thank you for joining us. Go out there and fight these battles. We're going to win this war. Have a great day.